Hi there, welcome to class. Today we're going to be talking about the body's defense mechanisms and how our body has all of these amazing adaptations to be able to ward off pathogens that would be causing disease, both that come into our body from the outside world and also for our own body cells when they become cancerous. So our primary objectives are, we want to be able to describe the function of the immune system and all of its relating parts. We want to explain the nonspecific immune response to infection, explain the humoral immune response, and the role of antibodies in immunity. And we want to explain the cell-mediated immune response and the role of T cells in immunity. So immunity is our body's ability to resist infectious disease by distinguishing self from non-self. An antigen is a relatively general term, but refers to any foreign substance that is recognized as non-self and activates our immune system. There are two types of immunity: non-specific immunity and specific immunity. So immunity is the capacity to resist and combat infection by pathogens such as viruses, bacteria, and fungus. There are a variety of different types of pathogens that can cause disease, and in a variety of different ways that they can cause disease. But the main categories of the body's defense are broken up into these three segments here. Our first line of defense are these nonspecific physical and chemical surface barriers. If a pathogen enters our body, we have the second line of defense that comes into play, and those are our nonspecific internal cellular and chemical defenses. Our third line of defense is actually the adaptive or acquired defenses, and this third line of defense is our immune response. But this line of defense is actually relatively slow to develop. So first we're going to spend some time talking about these first two lines of defense, which are our innate defenses. Typically, when we talk about anatomy and physiology, we talk about each of the body systems. There are 11 body systems. The immune system is actually not a body system in that way. The immune system is more of a functional body system, which involves the whole body, really. Oftentimes we discuss the immune system after we talk about the lymphatic system, because the white blood cells are housed in the lymph nodes, and the lymphatic organs have a lot to do with the immune system and the body's defense mechanism. But the immune system is really an all-over kind of wide body type of system. It's more of a functional body system. So the three lines of defense that we're going to be discussing are your physical, chemical, and mechanical barriers. That's the first line of defense. And these are all of these mechanisms of the body to keep the pathogens from even entering the body. So these are all external defenses. And then we have the second line of defense of the nonspecific innate immunity, and these are general responses that destroy the invaders when they have entered the body. So they include the cells like natural killer cells, they include complement proteins and interferons, other types of molecules that the body would be making non-specifically to defend itself. And then the third branch of immunity is actually the adaptive immunity, and that involves huge populations of white blood cells, of particularly B cells and T cells, that form and can identify specific pathogens that are invading our body and have invaded our body cells, and deal with those specific pathogens. This is a slide showing the cilia within the trachea, and they're on the epithelial cells of the trachea, the simple columnar epithelial cells. And you can see the cilia on the outside of those cells that would be beating and moving mucus and dust and debris up and out of the throat. And these cells are your goblet cells that produce that mucus so that we can clean our respiratory system. So some of these physical barriers involve the skin. The skin is a nearly impenetrable barrier. The skin has natural oils that are secreted that cause a waterproof barrier of oil to form on our skin. It's resistant to most toxins and enzymes of the invading organisms. So the skin is a pretty good physical barrier against pathogens that would be entering the body. The mucous membrane is our next physical barrier. The mucous membranes, of course, line the respiratory and digestive tracts, and we have those goblet cells that produce the mucus, and invading pathogens would not be able to stick and get to the cells because there's that sticky mucus that traps them and moves them out of those passageways quickly. And then we have the sweat and the oil glands of the skin. So our skin actually produces within these oil glands what's called the acid mantle. So we have that low pH that makes the environment very inhospitable to many of the bacteria that would be potentially occurring on our skin. We have sebum, the oil that is secreted from some of those glands that actually has antibiotic properties. We have the acid mantle of the vagina in that particular mucous membrane. So that is making the environment unfriendly to bacteria that would be coming in, in those regions of the body. And then we have the lining of the stomach that secretes the hydrochloric acid. Remember, it's the parietal cells of our gastric pits within our stomach that secrete that hydrochloric acid that would be able to break down many bacteria, because that hydrochloric acid has a pH of about 1 to 2, so pretty low pH. And then protein digesting enzymes too are being secreted by the chief cells in the stomach, and they would destroy the pathogens. We have the urine that has an acidity with the uric acid that causes the bacteria to not be able to grow. So the urine is a sterile fluid. It also is washing away those microbes from the urethra, just physically doing that. We have the saliva and tears that contain lysozyme. Lysozyme is an enzyme that kills bacteria that's found in the lysosomes. Remember those vesicles that occur in our cells. So this is a slide showing us these different physical barriers that occur in the body, and they're pretty good lines of defense. So in review, in our non-specific immunity, we first have all of these first lines of defense, which are all these physical barriers that are on the skin surface and in different body systems that would just naturally ward off pathogens. So your innate immunity, which is present at birth, is a part of our immune system that provides immediate and short-term protection against any antigen that would be potentially invading us. So it prevents the entry of pathogens or these disease-causing microorganisms. It provides these physical barriers on the skin and the mucous membranes, various secretions through our tears, our saliva, our sweat, our sebum, having the antibiotic molecules in it that would fight bacteria, and then the cilia in our respiratory tract, which would be sweeping out the mucus, which would trap any invading bacteria or viruses entering our respiratory system. The next line of defense, but is still part of the nonspecific immunity, involves many different types of white blood cells and various molecules or chemicals that are made to fight microbes. So we have the phagocytes of our immune system. Our phagocytes are white blood cells that are able to engulf and destroy pathogens. And so they can do this this mechanism called phagocytosis. So they're able to surround those pathogens, which with outstretches of the cell membrane, bring them in the form of a vesicle, and then digest those pathogens. So white blood cells like our neutrophils and like our macrophages are going to be the type of white blood cells that are phagocytic cells, also our dendritic cells. We also have molecules like the complement proteins of our immune systems. This is a group of about 20 different plasma proteins that are in our blood that, when they're activated, can form these attack complexes and cause a bacteria cell to actually burst or lyse. And then we have natural killer cells in our immune system. And natural killer cells are a specialized type of white blood cell that can attack kind of indiscriminately any type of cell that they identify as not self, not being part of our own tissues. And we're going to talk about those self markers a little bit later, the MHC complexes. So natural killer cells can secrete a chemical that attacks the cell membrane of cells that have been attacked by a virus or a bacteria, so we can destroy those cells. And they can eliminate any of those virus-infected cells, and they also can identify cancer cells. And then we have interferons. Interferons are a specific type of protein that is made by cells of our body, tissue cells, that have been infected with a virus. So these are antiviral proteins that the infected cells kind of release and secrete to warn other uninfected cells that that virus is coming. And what it does is it causes those other uninfected cells to be able to make proteins within them that can actually resist that viral infection from happening. Another type of response in our nonspecific immunity is fever. So a fever, of course, is abnormally high body temperature, but the adaptive value of fever is that it slows the growth rate of many pathogens. It also increases metabolic rate for our own tissue cells, so it can really help us to be able to fight that invading pathogen. And then we have inflammation. Inflammation is targeted in specific regions, or triggered in specific regions of our body by infection, by trauma in those areas. So the inflammation, the 4 cardinal signs of inflammation are your redness, your heat, your swelling, and pain. And all of those responses actually have quite a bit of adaptive value and can help us to fight that infection. So they're very important parts of our immune system, even though they're not necessarily very pleasant on our end to be experiencing. They certainly help to fight that invading pathogen. So this is a flow chart of those different parts of our immune system. So we're going to be talking about our nonspecific or innate immunity first. We're going to talk about each one of these parts of our nonspecific innate immunity. Then we're going to go through and we're going to talk about our specific or adaptive immunity in this lecture series. So this is where we'll start next time. Thank you.